Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and once again I'm delighted to be joined by Jim Orr. Jim is a regular Friday contributor. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing, Jim?
Fine, Paul.
Excellent. Now, apart from the football, everybody asks, how are you doing? Oh, I'm great, apart from what's happening at Celtic Park. And once again, we've got another defeat to discuss from last night. And for 23 minutes, it all looked as though, things were great. I mean, we looked as though we were actually playing like a bit of a team for 23 minutes, Jim. Tell me your overall view of the 4-2 defeat.
Well, I think it's the first time I've spoken to you since last Friday. So we've been Ross County last Sunday. Shocking.
Yep.
There's a team, Ross County, coming to Celtic Park to play against the champions with all their international players. They've got a bunch of journeymen, a team earning a few £100 a week, not won a game since September. Massive underdogs. They've got no right to beat Celtic, but they do. And how did they beat Celtic? Because they had a game plan, they had some structure, they had a bit of passion, aggression, confidence in what they were doing. Give Celtic the ball, let them play past the parcel, let them put high balls into the box. They can cope with that. They nick a goal, they look really good, they get a set piece. We were hopeless at set pieces if they won 2-0. They had no right to win that game, but they won it 2-0. Last night, we had no right to win that game last night. So if we didn't win it, then that's okay, that's fair enough. But to be 2 goals up and to lose 4-2, shocking, absolutely shocking. The whole thing is completely bizarre. And the fact that the manager is still there, and it's nothing to do with individual personalities. So I think if we call him the manager and we'll call the chief executive, it's just shocking what's going on. Because I think when we spoke last week, I talked about the Hibs game was my particular point where I tipped into, I'm going to not stick, I'm going to twist. And I think if we look back in the season, various people have had a tipping point where you feel if it was the Ferencváros game, and I tried to be objective over the course of the season. Ferencváros, we played really well and we're dead unlucky. These things happen. Do you sack the manager? No, I think we stick with that one. The Glasgow Derby, no shots in goal, shocking. Do we sack the manager then? Half our team is out. Eddie's got COVID. Ryan Christie, our best player, is out for the game. 2 other guys with COVID issues. 2 of our other best players are injured. Do you sack the manager then? No, that'd be unfair. Aberdeen, which I know is your tipping point. I thought we should have kind of gutsy second half performance. Some silly mistakes by 3 or 4 players could have stopped that last goal getting in. Maybe got the whole 3 points. Should we sack him then? You said yeah. I said I would maybe leave it. But unless their performances get better, and if we drop any more points, I think at that point that's my tipping point. And that game was the tipping point. In terms of team selection, it was shocking. In terms of performance, it was shocking. In terms of the comments after the game, it was shocking. And at that point, the manager had to go. And at that point, I think I no longer blame the manager. I blame the chief executive, because basically it's on his watch that we're still got the same manager. The manager should have been taken out of the equation. At that point in time, the assistant manager gets the gig on an interim basis until the chief executive finds someone he likes or thinks is good enough to get the job. That's what should have happened. So the defeat off of Sparta, that's on the chief executive. Ross County, chief executive. Last night, chief executive. And he's going to blow this. He's going to blow this, because when you look at what's coming up next 2 weekends are big weekends.
Yeah.
Home game against St Johnstone coming up. Kilmarnock, I think, the following week. Both at home. The league leaders are going to Ross County. So let's see how they perform against Ross County. Let's see what the game plan is from Ross County's point of view. And I think they also go to Tannadice next Sunday. So there's 2 games that I don't think will drop points, but you never know. If we take care of our 2 home games, you never know. But the confidence is at an all-time low, an absolute all-time low. Team selections, formations, tactics, motivation, structure, the whole thing is just shocking.
Now, you mentioned there that if a decision was made, and I agree with you, a decision should have been made. I mean, even Chris Sutton, who we know is Neil Lennon's close friend, said at the very beginning of the game last night that he was lucky to still be in a job. And I think most people that are tuning into the ACSOM bulletins agree with that, Jim. There has been various points, like you say, different points in the season where people have had their tipping point. And I must admit, you were more patient than most because every week I was asking you the question. And what you were doing, Jim, is you were giving me a very balanced response as to why he should keep his job. But then even, people like yourself who were looking for the ultimate balance came to a point where you think, I can't defend this anymore.
I think you have to be objective. You can't be subjective with this stuff. And you have to take all emotion out of the whole thing. And that's why if you call it, if you name him as Neil Lennon, then straight away you've got an emotional issue straight away. He's the manager. And you pick any other manager from the start of the season to now, 4 months of poor performances, poor results. Any other manager would have been gone by now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why he's still there. I don't understand what the chief executive's game plan is for this. Don't understand. I've heard all the stuff about, we'll give Lenny personal stuff. We'll give Lenny the cup final. No, you don't give Lenny the cup final. Absolutely not. This league is still there to be won.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
We're only 5 points behind. And you know what? See if we win the league, the last 4 months will be forgotten. Completely forgotten. We're only 5 points behind, in theory. But the way they're playing just now, there's no guarantee we'll get those we'll win those games in hand to get the 5 points back. But we need to do something now to give the whole place a boost.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hearing the same comments from the manager game after game after game.
No, you're right.
After 20 minutes. And I watched the game with my son, and I said, if we get out of this not losing any more than 5-2, I'll be happy. And I said that at 2-0. Because as soon as they scored, you knew it was going to happen next. Because I've seen it too many times before. Leo was exactly the same. But the difference between Leo was Leo didn't score until about 15, 20 minutes in the second half. So they didn't have the time to score all the goals. And I know we did really well in the first 20 minutes. And that's because we've got good individual players. Mm-hmm. Those good individual players did some good individual stuff. But in terms of structure and balance, and we're making loads of individual mistakes, silly mistakes. The free kick at the goal, ridiculous challenge. Ridiculous.
Yeah, you're right.
Barkas, why do you take one step to the side? Why do you do that? Why do you keep things dead simple? Don't overthink things. Maybe people are trying too hard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It all stems from the manager at the end of the day. And as I said, try and keep the kind of personal stuff out of it, keep the emotion out of it. Look at the manager's record from August to November. Look at the 4 months and see where we are. We've got a game on Sunday. Have a wee look there. St Johnstone haven't lost a game in the last 6 games. They've got 9 points over those 6 games. We've got 8 points. They're in better form than us. So Sunday's not a given. No games are a given. And until we get to a place where we're dead confident, then we're playing, it's just game to game. And the next point that we drop, I think that's it finished. And that's why we need change.
You're absolutely right. And now, one point you made there was the same things being kind of rolled out time after every bad performance. Now, last night, I think, was potentially the worst. I mean, I find it insulting for Neil Lennon to come out and say that what we saw was a team playing to a very high standard, because that was his words. That's not a high standard, Jim. I'm sorry, that's not a very high standard. I mean, you can then say, yeah, as a team, he might have meant as a team and it was individual errors. That doesn't wash with me. I mean, you look at some of the basic errors. Like you said, you've mentioned Barkas, and we're going to have to speak about the goalie situation from where we were to where we are now, and we're £4.5 million down. It's one of the worst bits of business I can remember in recent times at Celtic, Jim. But for Neil Lennon to come out and say that was a very high standard, I find preposterous.
I think we're playing against a very good team. So if you try and match them for bits of the game, then that's fair enough. I don't think, as I said before, we had no expectations to win the game last night. But if you're 2 goals up after 20 minutes, then you maybe change things. You maybe have a wee think about, let's not do it silly for the next 10, 15 minutes. And that's if we're watching the game again with my son. I said, we'll definitely lose at least 1 goal before the halfway hours are over. And that's what we do. I can see that coming. You can see that coming. Most Celtic fans can see that coming, but the management will be able to see that coming. If you're 2 goals up, don't do anything silly for the next 15, 20 minutes. Try and get to half time. All the usual kind of stuff you should be looking to do. But what do you do to try and achieve that? I don't know. We just kept playing the same way. And to be fair, the first 20 minutes, Milan were all over the place. Mm-hmm. They certainly helped with the first 2 goals. And we could have scored another 1 or 2 because they were all over the place. But once they get their goal, as far as I was concerned, that was the game finished. And it was just trying to keep the score down. And I know the goalkeeper made a couple of good saves in the second half. But once they went 3-2 up, I think they felt that's us done that. The match is won. But it's just the lack of not doing anything different.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't lose 4-2 if you're 2 goals up. And if you do that, then you have to ask serious questions. It's not a good thing; it's a bad thing.
What's happened here is on a daily basis there was a variety of subjects and topics being discussed on a Celtic State of Mind's bulletin, Jim. Over the last few weeks, absolutely influenced by what's happening on the park, we seem to be talking about poor performances, poor coaching and management, and poor leadership from the board, as well as poor engagement. And you've mentioned the CEO. Now, the other day there was a suggestion that why not invite Peter Lawwell for an interview on a Celtic State of Mind. Now, I can confirm that the first time I invited Peter Lawwell for an interview was in March 2019, and I will be taking up that mantle. I will be trying to get Peter Lawwell on the show. I doubt very much that it will be a live broadcast, but what I'm hoping to do, Jim, is I'm hoping to interview him so that we can play that interview as soon as the first day of our fundraiser on the 19th of December finishes. It will premiere on YouTube, but obviously we need to try and get an agreement. So what I would like to do, and this is because yesterday, 2 days ago, there was a pledge from one of our viewers, and they pledged that they would pay £1,000 to one of the chosen charities or the collection of charities that we have, should Peter Lawwell agree. So that was to add a wee bit of kind of like, turn the screw a wee bit on the situation. Now, unbelievably, the person in question paid the £1,000 anyway into the account, Jim. So regardless of whether or not Peter Lawwell comes onto a Celtic State of Mind, the £1,000 is going to charity. So that's a brilliant, that's a superb charitable donation from that individual. And yesterday, when we checked the total, it's sitting at £2,500, which is superb. So thanks everybody for getting involved. And the link will be underneath the video on all the platforms today. But there was another development on that yesterday, Jim. So you'll understand there's a lot of people talking online about getting a refund for what they lost out on last season. And I've seen a lot of talk about that, actually voting with their feet. And someone who is normally part of the corporate hospitality at Celtic Park, it's the same situation for them. So there's a vast amount of cash sitting that could be reclaimed, or it goes towards next season. And this particular company, we're going to put it towards next season, hopefully, whenever we get back in. This season it would be. But they've actually got in touch and said that they will also throw their £9,000 into the pot should Peter Lawwell agree to this interview. So we've got £10,000 riding on Peter Lawwell speaking to a Celtic State of Mind, and that will all go to charity. I mean, how amazing is that?
Great stuff, Paul. Well done.
Superb. So I would love to speak.
We also mentioned the refunds from last year. I was going to leave the refund, basically. But what happened, or the sequence of events that happened there, I think it was a Monday that they announced officially that was the league finished and that Celtic were the champions. Mm-hmm. And then the following day, the SFA announced that they were not going to take any further action on the Resolution 12 stuff. And that reminded me just how much the chief executive had let the Celtic fans down over Resolution 12.
Yep.
And I thought, tell you what I'll do. I'll take my refund and I'll contact the Resolution 12 guys and I'll say, see if you're going to take any legal action, you can have my refund, guys. So I contacted somebody who knew the Resolution 12 guys, and I contacted them and said, I'm going to get a refund here, so and you're quite welcome to it. Because I think the chief executive has let the Celtic fans down since 2012. Shocking, as far as I'm concerned. So that's that. And the other thing that I'm dead annoyed about is that nothing's been said about this year's season ticket refund. Mm-hmm. I can't believe that you and I spent £600, as well as another 54,000 people. Some of them have multiple season tickets in their family, spending £1, £2, £3,000. We have to get something back out of that. You're not going to charge us £600 to watch some games on some sort of very unreliable streams this year. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do about it? And I've heard nothing. I got an email about 2 years ago. Did you get the email 2 years ago?
I've not checked, Jim.
No. Check your emails, right? This is from Celtic this morning. And let me read you what you said. Talk about lack of self-awareness, right? It's coming from the Celtic store, where supporters support, is the headline there, right? With Christmas jumper day December 11th, fast approaching. Shop online to find a selection of official Celtic Christmas jumpers, available now in a wide range of sizes. Better yet, our special Celtic reindeer and polar bear jumpers are available in matching junior sizes. Perfect to kit out the whole family this Christmas. So there's lack of awareness. There's engagement with fans. Tell us about a refund on my £600. Please, I'd like to know, because I'm in a fortunate position, and possibly you are just now, that you could afford to pay that £600. Loads of people couldn't, but they did. Loads of people have lost their jobs in this pandemic. They really can't afford that. So tell me what your plans are. And what I said to one of my mates a few months ago, basically that we knew pretty early on there'd be no fans coming back to the games. So tell us what's going to happen, Celtic. And what I'd have done, and if I can think of this, and I'm not the most intelligent guy in the world, but what I'd have done is basically said to the fans, you know what? We'll give you half of it back. We'll give you £300 back, but we'll give you against the next 2 years' season tickets.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give you £150 off next year's and £150 off the following years. And that'll hook you in then. That'll keep you going next year, because next year's season tickets are going to be decimated for a couple of reasons, I think. But if they did that, you would think, well, that's okay, that's fair enough. I'm getting a discount next year, £150, a discount the following year, £150. Now, the £600 we paid this year covers about 20 matches-ish. So that's roughly £30 a match.
Mm-hmm.
If they give us half of that back, that's roughly £15 a match. What they could have then done is put all the games in pay-per-view and charge £16 for the other guys. And if you get 50,000 doing that, that would make up for giving us our £300 credit, right? If I can think of that,
I know.
why can't I think of that? Because you know what? We're paying a chief executive £3.5 million a year. And we get emails like that this morning that I can get a Christmas jumper next week, after the shambles last night, after the shambles for the last few weeks, after being told that they're self-entitled and all this kind of nonsense. It's unacceptable. And the only way things will change, and I've had a chat with you before about this, is it's all down to pound notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're in for a massive shock next season in terms of season tickets, because as I've told people before on the podcast, this is the season of the 10. Now, whether we win the 10 or whether we don't win the 10, it's the season of the 10. And that's why we've sold the tickets out, and that's why there's a waiting list. Next season, the season of the 11 or season 0, I think they'll find it really difficult to shift season tickets next year. And I think, just guessing obviously, you could take 10,000 off that 54,000, that'll leave you 44,000. And if they continue doing what they're doing just now, I'm one of the guys who's really thinking hard about next season. I'm kind of 50-50 on a season ticket next year because of how we've been treated just now.
Mm-hmm.
We're like idiots just now. And that's all assuming that fans are back in the games. Because if fans are not back in the games, it'll be wiped out, it'll be decimated. They'll be lucky if they get 5,000 next year, because we're not going to do this again. We're certainly not going to give them £600.
No.
Watch games on TV. That's never going to happen again. And I feel really, really sorry for all these guys, all these families who can ill afford to do that but are still doing it. And they're maybe paying £1, £2, £3 out because of 4 or 5 season tickets. Where's the communication? Where's the, we'll look after you guys?
I know.
You know, where is it? It's non-existent. And unless you vote with your pound notes, they're not going to bother. And I've had chats to you before about the Whites and the Kellys and all these kind of guys. And you can shout to your blue or a different colour in the face, they're not interested. And we've had a couple of protests in the last couple of weeks, or the last week. The banner at Celtic Park, ideal. That's a good thing to do. You go up there, a few guys, socially distanced, you put your point across, you put out a statement, it goes in social media, it goes in the mainstream media, job done, you've done your point. Will things change? Of course they won't change. Then you had last Sunday, where people say, let's go to Celtic Park and voice their concerns. And you know that's going to end in tears. Mm-hmm. You know that's going to end in tears because it's disorganised and it's emotional and it's knee-jerk stuff. And if there's 200 or 300 or 400 people, they're only as strong as the weakest person that turns up there. So we need one idiot to either physically abuse a policeman or verbally abuse a policeman or damage some property, and everyone will be tarred with the same brush. So that was I can understand people want to vent, and that's where you go to vent. But if you do things like that are disorganised, it's going to end in tears. And what I'd be looking for just now is people who do have a voice, because we have a supporters affiliation. Is it still called that?
Yes.
Association. So those are groups who stand for a number of supporters, and they have a named individual, I'm assuming, who's head of that group. Maybe I've missed a memo, but I haven't heard anything from anyone to say that we're not happy with this. So if the people who are there to make a difference say nothing, what chance do you have? And I know there's a Celtic Trust meeting tomorrow. I think there's a Zoom meeting on tomorrow. So maybe something might come of that. And you've got the AGM coming up soon. You've got the Resolution 12 guys who've done a phenomenal job, and they're still chipping away at it, chip, chip, chip. And all that stuff will be sorted out someday. It definitely will be sorted out someday. And there'll be a lot of people within Celtic Park who are a bit concerned when all that stuff comes out. So I think, as a club, as a chief executive, I think we've been let down for a number of years. You could take this bigger and look at the performances in Europe compared to other similar teams, your Ajaxes and your Benficas and all this kind of stuff. And it's been shocking. Absolutely shocking. Anyway, that's a bigger thing. What was the question?
Jim, it doesn't matter what the question was. What you've said there is what a huge amount of Celtic fans are feeling. And thanks for bringing all that out, because you mentioned a few things there that we'll pick up on. You're talking about engagement. And I was critical last week, or the beginning of this week, of the engagement of the club towards us, the supporters. Because
what's your expectations?
Well, I think that communication is key, and I'm looking for leadership, Jim. And I'm not seeing any leadership. I mean, you get a carefully worded statement of a couple of hundred words, which basically said nothing. It came out from Peter Lawwell, and it was prompted obviously by the scenes after the Ross County game. They then think that engaging with the fans is putting Scott Brown in front of a camera with prepared questions being fired at him, whereby he's obviously going to sing off the same hymn sheet. They're preparing him, Scott Brown, for that, and that's not what we're looking for either, because it just reeks. And they're telling us that we are entitled, and I just think the club actually is behaving more entitled, because they think they're entitled to our money. Like you say, they're entitled to our support, which they always get, but they're entitled to that support without any form of criticism. That's never going to happen.
I think your expectations are too high, basically, because Celtic are a public limited company. They're no different to Amazon or Morrison's or Sainsbury's. They just want your money because they've got shareholders there. That's what they're there. That's why they're there. That's the whole point. And you talked about, I heard you 2 or 3 days ago talking about, a feeling of you're not connected to the club, that you're disconnected. Exactly, because I don't think there's been any connection to Celtic for a number of years. Because, as I said, it's a public limited company, and the players that are playing are all multi-millionaires. So there's never any. There's no connection. You have to go back to maybe the 80s, certainly the 70s, a lot of the 60s as well, where the players lived in the next street to you. They drank in the same pubs. The kids went to the same school as you. There was a connection there. Even the guys on the board would do the same thing. But what we've got now is a public limited company, and the whole point of a public limited company is to make money for their shareholders, and that's what they do. And that's why we get the Christmas jumper emails out today, when we've been embarrassed last night. Another embarrassing performance. But tell you what, you can get this range of Christmas jumpers that are really, really good. Get in there, guys. Get those Christmas jumpers for all the family, not just you, Paul John Dykes. You, the wife, and your daughter and your son. You get in there because it's for all the family. You show your support to Celtic. And as I said, it said at the top, the Celtic store, where supporters support. That's the tagline. And you're thinking, what? That's the tagline. Where supporters support. Buy pyjamas. Right? It's no different to Amazon. No different at all.
No, you're right.
And it'll be saying things like, you bought this last time, why not buy this DVD? Or why buy this Celtic tanker? So it depends on your expectations. My expectations are really, really low, and they meet my expectations. If yours are high, you'll be disappointed.
Well, I'm disappointed, Jim, but I think what you're saying is totally accurate, and that's the way that we are treated by these multi-millionaires who are on the board as well. Before we go into any of the comments, Jim, there is a request for you from Stephen Kenneth coming through on YouTube. If playwright Jim plans to bring the story of the decade to the stage, could he use creative license and pen a different ending? Our current trajectory equates to a miserable night at the theatre. Come on, tell us a better ending, Jim. What's going to happen in the next couple of weeks that's going to make a better ending for Celtic?
Well, I've said at the start, the manager has to go. On the kind of play stuff, there's a bit at the end of Benelli Bratback, which refers to winning the 10. I think I might to be have a wee look at that again. And then the next play, Ben Bertie refers to the 10 again. So a wee bit of a rewrite having to come. The only thing that can change it is a change of manager at this point in time. It has to be. I'll give the place a boost. And even if it's John Kennedy, for now, it's what you have to do. I can understand that that the new manager might not be ready just now. That's totally understandable. And even with the best will in the world, you might not be able to expect somebody to come in straight away. There might be issues in trying to get the guy away from his, if he's in work just now, to try and get him away from his current employer. If he's not in work just now, and you mentioned some names last week, why aren't we going after these guys as well? So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. What we do know is that we're not very confident about a game against St Johnstone at home Sunday. And if you say that a few times, you're thinking, what sorry? St Johnstone? And they're the form team. If you put the two teams together, they're the form team. Just shocking.
You mentioned John Kennedy. You also mentioned, Jim, other candidates, other possibilities. And the situation we're currently in, that what happens is every manager's got their representative, and representatives will be contacting Celtic at this point because, we are dealing in the modern game. So they're looking at the situation at Celtic thinking there may well be a position at that club very soon. So there are plenty of people letting Celtic know of their availability. Now, John Kennedy was one of the names you mentioned, and I can see the scenario. I can actually see it playing out whereby John Kennedy's there. And I don't think John Kennedy, and by the way, before I'm going to qualify this, I don't know what happens behind the gates of Lennoxtown. I can only go by what I see. Now, people may say I'm reading his body language wrong, and that's fine, and I'll take that. But one thing John Kennedy certainly isn't doing, and nobody can argue with this, he's no supporting Lenny after games, whereby he's certainly not ever taken the flack. He's never taken the heat off of Lenny. He's never speaking to the press. He's never speaking to the press so that he can get a message out to the fans. And if I had a number two, if I had an assistant and that was a proper team and we all wanted the same thing, I would expect at some point over the last couple of weeks or months that John Kennedy would realise that Neil Lennon's really struggling. And he would say, you know what, Lenny, I'm going to speak to the press tonight. You just stay in here. And I've never seen any of that. And I think that's because he is the manager in waiting. In his mind, he's the manager in waiting. He wants Lenny to move aside so he can take front and centre.
Of course, and that's perfectly understandable. I mean, what you said a second ago there is that for all we know, and that's what I said last week, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And for all we know, John Kennedy has offered to do that. And maybe Neil Lennon said, just beat it, stay out of this. And from what we can gather, again, because we're all experts in body language these days, that it does appear as if they don't get on. And it does appear that maybe John Kennedy is the manager in waiting in his mind. If you've been there that long and you've served under all those managers, and as I think I might have said last week, obviously the chief executive must like him. As I heard last week, the previous manager was talking about taking him down to Leicester with him, so he must rate him. And he was in the frame for the Hibs job. And Damien Duff was on record as saying he thought he was a really good coach. So these are people in the know. I'm not in the know. I'm just the guy who paid the £600. So I don't know, but these guys are saying maybe there's something there. And he's obviously been there for a while. And he's not going to stay there for a while unless he's thinking, I might get a chance at some point with this. And maybe he thought he was going to get his chance when the last manager left. When Neil Lennon got the job, when the current manager got the job, he should have insisted, I want my own guys. He didn't do that. So I don't think you can have a lot of sympathy with the manager because he took the job on under those conditions. Mm-hmm. And if that's what you do, that's what you do. So you live or die by what you decided to do at the time. And I know we hear all these stories about who's buying the players, etc., etc. If you signed up under those conditions, I don't think you can expect a lot of sympathy. And if your results and your performances have been as dire since they've been since the start of the season, it's not personal, it's not emotional, it's not subjective, it's objective. It's not good enough. It has to go.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
I think if he goes, what happens next? You have to give it to the guy who's still there, right? As opposed to bringing someone else in, you have to say, you're the guy that's still there for now, so you take the team. And what's to say, if he did take the team, all of a sudden we want this really good run, and win every game up to Ibrox. He goes to Ibrox and wins at Ibrox. What's that happened?
Then we're all wrong.
Aye.
We're all wrong. And the problem is, when you look at the ruthlessness of that Rangers side at the moment, and I'm not here to sing the praises of another team, but let's be totally frank about it. They're ruthless this season, Jim, right? And they're in the form, and it was you that pointed it out to me a few weeks back. They're in the form, if you're looking at points per game average, that Celtic were in when we won the Invincible treble. Now, that doesn't look as though that's going to change anytime soon. But similarly, it doesn't look as though Celtic's form is going to change. So, yeah, I would love that set of results to happen the way you've just described it. And I would love to be proven wrong. And I think everybody I've spoken to is the same. I think the issues at the club at the moment are much deeper. I mean, we opened the show talking about some of these issues, Jim, and you're spot on. And I think what I'm trying to do is, right, we need to win the league this season. We absolutely do. So let's have a look at that as a short-term situation, and then we can maybe deal, because I don't think there's going to be any movements above the head of Neil Lennon and the coaching staff at this time. I think maybe when we regroup in the summer, that's something that we can look at, but we need to sort out the playing side of it. And I think at the moment, here's the thing: have you ever considered, Jim, that the only two people that the board can go to at the moment, because I don't think they're very creative thinkers, have been Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan. Now, their names have come up several times, and again, rumours. Martin O'Neill came out and defended Neil Lennon just the other week there, saying that you can blame COVID, you can blame ball and goalie, but don't blame Neil Lennon. Again, yeah, I totally disagree with Martin O'Neill, as much as I respect him. Now, let's remember the age of Martin O'Neill, where he is in terms of his age, right? Had anybody had any foresight, they might have considered Martin O'Neill in a different role a lot earlier than now to assist Neil Lennon. O'Neill has always been Neil Lennon's mentor. He speaks about it in his autobiography. He's spoken about it several times in interviews since then. He would have been ideal as a support mechanism for Neil Lennon a year ago, 18 months ago, May 2019. Not now. He's not going to come in and save this sinking ship now, because Martin O'Neill's final hurrah, I believe, in management was with Ireland. Now, he then had a short spell with Nottingham Forest and it didn't work out well. It seems like he's the only guy in football that's willing to employ Roy Keane. So the only way you're going to get Keane is if O'Neill comes in. But I don't think for a second O'Neill, if he's been offered the job or if it's even been pitched to him, would consider it due to his relationship with Neil Lennon. And actually, when you think about it, Jim, Gordon Strachan was the man that gave Neil Lennon his opportunity as a coach at Celtic. And I don't think Gordon Strachan would take the job either. And I'm basing that on the question was asked in January by myself to Gordon Strachan about management. And he said at that time, he doesn't want, at his age, he doesn't want to deal with the politics of dealing with a football board any longer. So can you imagine saying that and really believing it and then joining Celtic? But I don't think he would do it with a sense of loyalty towards Neil Lennon. But then flip it, because we're talking about Neil Lennon accepting the situation as it was with John Lennon as number two. And you're right, he's got to take responsibility for that if it hasn't worked, because he accepted it. I'm now thinking about Gavin Strachan, because Gordon Strachan, of course, gives Neil Lennon his opportunity as a coach. And it looks to me as though the appointment may not have been identified or pitched by Neil Lennon, but it's certainly been run past Neil Lennon. And I think that Neil Lennon has had a sympathy towards Gavin Strachan, and for me, it's a job for the boys, and it's been the wrong choice. So Neil Lennon's in a situation now that he can't change. He's got his coaching staff, he's going to have to stick with them. But if there's a change, for me, somebody has to manage the team. Of course they do, Jim. But I think the issue is with the whole coaching side, not just Lenny. But that's my view on it. And I think that's why, a change hasn't been made yet. I think the only options they've considered are Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, and both of them wouldn't take the job.
Mm-hmm. You said John Lennon. I think that boat is sailed. Did
I mention the real legend, John Lennon, right?
That was great. I was out of the box thinking there. That was pretty good. My theory is that if we get rid of the manager just now and it goes to John Kennedy, falling down on an interim basis, I would have brought in Gordon Strachan to help him out, to be a sounding board for him, not to manage the club, but just to be there to kind of keep him right over a short period of time. Not for John Kennedy to take the job on a permanent basis, But if he had Gordon Strachan at his side that he could, use to sound things off, that might be quite a helpful thing. Over a very short period of time, I'm not saying that's the kind of long-term solution. I think the club have looked at other people, and I think they've kind of said thanks but no thanks. Who would want to come to Scotland? Because, we've talked about these people like Rafa Benitez and Pochettino and all that stuff. To me, that's just fantasy stuff, because these are in demand. These are top of the range. I think marquee was the term you used. These are marquee managers. But the same as saying we're going to try and sign somebody like Marcus Rashford or Harry Kane, something like that. These are the top managers. Why would they entertain coming to the Scottish League, which is not very good, taking over a team like Celtic, who have been trounced at the moment by the team across the city, having to try and make up a 5-point deficit for a few months? That's not, something I can see these elite managers wanting to do. So we're not going to get somebody of that kind of level. But you know what? The Ross County manager would do me at this point in time, because he can set his team up. He's got a structure. He's got a plan. He gets his team to play in an enthusiastic, aggressive way for his team. Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. There's a name that's got no chance, obviously, but would he be any worse than what we've got just now? I don't think so. And after Ross County last Sunday, you can bring in anyone you want. It has to be better than what we've got just now. And why the chief executive can't see that is way, way beyond me. And to answer the point I think they're making about Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, if that's the extent of the thinking, again, I think we've been let down. Again, my expectations are not up there, they're down here somewhere. And if we get Gordon Strachan and Martin O'Neill in, they've met my expectations, because I really don't think they know what they're doing. I think it's been dead easy at Celtic. If you're the chief executive of Celtic for the last, how many years has it been? Is it 16 years or 17 years or something like that?
Yeah, he's in his 18th year, yeah. So,
and also, again, to be absolutely fair about this, I don't know what he does behind the scenes. So it's hard to criticise someone. But I've heard things like, well, he brings in lots of sponsorship, say. Well, if you're the biggest team in Scotland and you're playing in Europe and you're on TV every 2 minutes and in the papers, then sponsors will be banging your door down to give you sponsorship. Mm-hmm. So how much of an achievement is that? Try being the chief executive of Hamilton Accies or Motherwell or something like that and getting big deals in. There's a challenge. But if you're the chief executive of Celtic and getting sponsorship deals, I'd imagine that's not particularly hard. And for a lot of the last 9 seasons, it's been a straightforward league victories. So where's the achievement in that? I don't see it. For £3.5 million a year, for a company, and Celtic are not a big company. They only turned over £83 million last year, and we gave out nearly 4% to the chief executive, 70 grand a week. What's that? 2-3 times the highest paid player last year. Mm-hmm. Madness, just total and utter madness. What could we have got for that 70 grand a week? You're not 2 or 3 players.
No, absolutely, and we're moving on to that subject now, Jim.
Where's the logic in this? Where's the strategy in this? We've had board members having a go at the fans in the past 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Where's the logic in that? Where's the logic in biting the hand that feeds? All they had was the 10. And this has been gaining momentum since maybe 3 or 4 in a row, because 10's in sight with no opposition. It was a cakewalk to that 10. But then maybe 2 seasons ago, all of a sudden there's a challenge. Mm-hmm. And there should have been a challenge. Now there's a bigger challenge. And I don't actually mind. I mean, I like to think I'm quite an objective person. If we were playing really well and we were putting points on the board, playing good, attractive football and dropping the odd point, and the team across the city continued to play the way they've been playing, and they won the league with us playing really well, I would say, well done. Well done, because we tried the best we could and you were just a wee bit better. Fair play to you, hats off. Right? But we're not doing that. We're just giving it. We're just giving up at this point in time. Number of people that have said a few weeks ago, that's the league finished. What? It's not finished yet. Number of people that said last week after the Sparta nonsense that we shouldn't play the game last night. Right? We should just give them the points. What kind of talk is that? It's a game of football. Just give them the points. We shouldn't bother turning up. We'll take a 3-0 defeat. That's the way fans are talking. That's the mindset of the fans because of what's happened between August and now. And the chief executive can't see that. I'm just stunned at why there's no change and there's no understanding of that. I mean, I don't expect anyone within the club. You talked about the Scott Brown interview as if he's been held hostage, sort of thing. Don't do that because you're just looking silly. Don't say anything. If you've nothing good to say, don't say anything. If you want to say something, then be a wee bit honest. We're not asking you to kind of say that all the things that are not going well behind the scenes. Be honest. We're struggling. We should be playing better. We know we should be playing better. We have to be playing better. You guys have, dug deep in this really difficult time. We'll try our very best. It's not working out for us, but rest assured we can do what we can to do this. It's unacceptable. Where we are just now is totally unacceptable. I'm just astonished we are where we are and how quickly we've managed to get there. As I said, various points in the past 4 months where other Celtic fans have been at that point that you just want to tick, rid of them. And I've kind of felt, no, but Hibs, that for me. And after that, this is all on the chief executive to me. I feel sorry for the manager. I really feel sorry for the manager because I think he's doing an impossible job now.
No, he is. He is, Jim.
And there'd be nothing better to see Neil Lennon, and I'll mention by name, actually winning that league and standing there in May, holding the league trophy, having completed the 10. Nothing would be better than that. That'd be absolutely brilliant. But you have to be objective about this thing, and you have to look at exactly where we are and what's happened so far. And a decision has to be made, and that's why someone's getting paid £3.5 million to do it. And the decisions are getting made, and we're just, as I said, we are fearful of St Johnstone at home on Sunday. And across the city, they must be laughing their heads off at this because we've had the last number of years where there's been all this banter year stuff and just the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks, unbelievable in terms of results, in terms of what's coming out of the club. That's almost like the kind of last 8 years in 3 or 4 weeks.
It has been an omni-shambles, Jim. But listen, I'm looking back to a time, and it is relevant. I'm looking back to a time where you felt it necessary to gather together fans of Celtic Football Club because you were concerned at the way the club was being run, mismanaged at the very, very top. Obviously, that was a long time ago now, Jim. And certain groups of fans have made their feelings known. You then go into social media now. You then have broadcasts like the ACSOM Bulletin and others where people discuss the matter, and you get a sense across the board that there's a huge amount of Celtic fans thinking the same way at the moment. In this day and age, how do you get that message across? Because Celtic fans have been called entitled, behaving as though we're entitled. I think the Celtic board are behaving as though they're entitled. They're entitled to our constant influx of cash. I mean, you mentioned the email there. I was preparing for the broadcast. I've not been in my Gmail. But they're sending us an email after a humbling 4-2 defeat once again in the Europa League to tell us to buy a polar bear jumper. Seriously. I mean, how do we actually engage with this current board? I know you knew how to engage with the board back in the 90s, but it's changed days now.
You don't engage. You said the word cash. That's the words. I mean, if you go back to the early 90s, and basically, we did a podcast, or I did a podcast with you 2.5 years ago or so, get into some of the details behind it. I don't want to bore people just now with that stuff, but basically back in the day when the old board, the Kellys and the Whites ran the club, and people were kind of putting up banners and making lots of noises and phone-ins, because back in the day, phone-ins were the only way that people could maybe make their voice heard, or write to the papers and all this kind of stuff. And the point we were making at the time was, you can shout as much as you want, you can make as much banners as you want, but see if you go along every Saturday and you hand over your money to the Whites and the Kellys, what incentive do they have to leave? None. So unless you stop doing that, nothing will change. And what we did at the time, there was 5 of us formed a committee and called ourselves Save Ourselves. And what you have, and we thought long and hard about this, because what we did at the start was we went to Celtic Park in a freezing cold winter's game again. I think it was Hearts or something. And they were rubbish as usual. I think we drew 1 each that day. And we had little leaflets, and we set up a PO box number. And this was at the time, Rangers had won their second of their 9 in a row. So it wasn't as if they won 7 or 8 in a row. They won 2 in a row. But the board were a complete shambles. Didn't know what they were doing. They brought a guy called Brian Dempsey onto the board and then sacked him from the board. And that was the kind of catalyst for saying, these guys don't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we set up a PO box and we said to fans on this leaflet, if you're not happy, get in contact with us and we'll see what we can do next. So we stand there in the freezing cold handing out leaflets. For every second person it came past, it was like, F off you. F off. What you doing? Support the team. Every second person. So not everyone shares your views. You have to accept everyone doesn't share your views. But what came on from that is we then had about 300 or 400 people who got back to us. We then organised a meeting in Shelton Town Halls, and we got Brian Dempsey to come along and Jim Craig and a few other people. And we only invited the people who'd get back to us. And then we were accused of all sorts of stuff. It's only those and such as those that can come along. And the reason that we did that is we had to know who was coming. Or I had to know who was coming because it was my name on the lease or on the hire of the thing. And it shows you how naive I was at the time. I'm saying to the council, why does it have to be my name? Can it not be save ourselves? And I said, no, you need a name. Because if anything happens, you're to blame. We're going to come looking for you. So all of a sudden, we'll get 300 or 400 Celtic fans come along. And I'm thinking, if this kicks off in some way, I'm to blame. I'm hit for this. And that's my point about what happened last Sunday. Nobody was hit for that. You have to control these kind of things. And we were on this committee, and there was 3 of us were season ticket holders at the time. And there was only about 6,000 season ticket holders back in 1990. And because the media were actually very sympathetic to this cause about trying to save Celtic, whenever we said something, it went straight into the papers. So 3 of us said, we're not going to renew our season tickets next season. This was like something like, say, the January. So you bought your season ticket. So even if you didn't go to the games, it would have no effect. And we said, what you can't do as a Celtic fan is ask other Celtic fans to do stuff what you're doing. All you can do is say, I'm going to do this. And if people want to do the same thing, then fair play. There's only 3 of us giving up our season tickets. So it's a pebble in the ocean. But that made the news. And it's the Save Ourselves Committee have said, we're not renewing our season tickets next year. And I then stopped going to the games. And it got worse. And you knew it would get worse because what we said is, this is going to have to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And that was early 1991 then, at that point in time. And Fergus came early 1994, when things got to the lowest level. How did they get to there? What gave Fergus the opportunity for coming in? People stopped going to the games. There was a famous game against Kilmarnock, and all the Celts were changed stuff, where there was less than 10,000. And the bank were owed, I think it was about 3 or 4 million at the time, which doesn't seem a lot of money now, but back then it was a fortune. Mm-hmm. And the Celtic board, the Kellys and the Whites, didn't have a lot of money. This was shares that they inherited from their families. They saw it as their club. They didn't have £3 or £4 million. They didn't have the money to address the issue that we needed in All-Seater Stadium. So they were sinking because of money. And the bank were going to wind them up because the bank were owed money. And if I was the bank, I'd have been saying the same thing. You owe us £4 million. Sell Paul McStay. Sell John Collins. Sell Pat Bonner. We want the money. We didn't do that. Fergus came in and Fergus saved the club. And everything that's happened since then, is down to Fergus McCann. The stadium, how well the team have done, the 9 in a row, that's all down to Fergus McCann. But the question you're posing is, how do you change it? You change it by money. You just don't go. And at the moment, in terms of next season, because of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I'm kind of 50-50 on next year. I may not buy a season ticket, but still go to the games. But it would cause some damage if if people like me didn't buy a season ticket, mm-hmm. just chose the games they went to. So if it's a cold Wednesday night against Hamilton Accies in the middle of winter, I'm really not fancy going to that game tonight. And because actually things have changed since 1990, in the 30 years since 1990, I can actually, as I'm doing just now, I can flick a button and watch a game.
Yep.
There's all these internet streams that you can dive into. So I didn't have to pay my £600 this year, and the chances are I could have still seen most of these games. without paying a penny. Okay, night freeze and all this kind of stuff. But I paid the £600. Am I so willing to do that next year? No, not because of what's happened over the last few weeks. And it's nothing to do with them having some sense of being entitled. That's not what it's about at all. It's about being objective, and it's about the people making the right decisions. So Neil Lennon was fantastic. The manager was fantastic last season. Won the league cup, through to the semi-final of the Scottish Cup, won the Europa League group, unbelievably good, brilliant. We get to July, and we've said this in previous podcasts, we spend the guts of £13 million, we bring in 6 players, most of them are on big wages, they're coming from the EPL, they're coming from Serie A. We're all set up, we don't lose any players, we're all set up, brilliant. I can't say anything bad about that at all. Now we can maybe think about whether we bought the right players, but that's a different argument, that's a different story. But the manager's done what he's done, it's not worked out, that had to change, and it's not changed. And I'm annoyed about that. Scunnered, that's the first word I use when I came on. I'm scunnered that hasn't changed. It's not just me. So that will kind of influence my decision going forward into next year. I mentioned the fact about I took last year's refund, and I'm happy to give that to the Resolution 12 guys for doing something. I'm expecting a refund this year. Yeah. And that might harm the club financially, but that's not my problem. Not my problem at all. Because what you said earlier, Paul, was I think your expectations are high. I have a very simple expectation with this one. You're not asking me to pay £600 to watch 20 games on a stream, are you? Are you really saying that? Because what's Sky Sports? What's that these days? £20 a month or something? Unlimited football for £20 a month. What's that a year? £240, £240, and I'm paying 600. I don't think so. I'm expecting something back.
Yeah.
I'm expecting some news. I'm expecting something, not the Christmas jumper thing. I'm expecting, by the way, Jim, we appreciate what you've done with your £600, and this is how we're going to play it next. And if they want to give me money off next year, then fair enough, do that. Right? But what they've lost, and again, getting back to the kind of lack of thinking that I see there, is that because all the games are going to be on the internet this year, they couldn't put the games on pay-per-view because the season ticket holders like you and I and our 54,000 pals would have went mental, would have went bonkers. Unless they were going to charge them £30, because that's what we're paying for each game. And they were never going to charge them £30. So they've lost an opportunity there to have made a lot of money because they haven't thought it through. I find it bonkers. And then when you look at actually what people with the UK pay for Celtic TV, it's really, really cheap.
Yeah.
Really, really cheap. A number of the games, they're getting every single game. I think, how much is it? Is it £180 or £200?
It's peanuts. Yeah.
It's peanuts. It's home and away all season for less than £200. And we're paying £600 for what we're getting just now. It's unacceptable. But as I said, I'm expecting to see something. And the only thing that will change anything in life, not just football, is money. Because everything comes down to the pound notes at the end of the day. You won't change it by banners, and you won't change it by shouting and bawling at people. And your cause is lessened if kind of stuff happens during those protests.
Yeah.
To put you in a bad light. And all the club will do, or the company will do, is use that to deflect into something else. That was the story of last Sunday. It wasn't the complete and utter 90 minutes shambolic performance of the team. It was somebody threw a barrier. That was the story of last week. Somebody threw a barrier. There you go. There's your expectations.
Now, Jim, you've spoken a hell of a lot of sense over the last 50 odd minutes, and I think a lot of Celtic fans will appreciate this because sometimes it's difficult. Well, I always think you speak sense, Jim. Paul Cockwell dips in and out almost on a daily basis on the bulletin. He's a Hibs fan. If you look at the players Celtic have, it's a team and a half, just not playing as a team. That's why they need a new manager. It's interesting sometimes to get the perspectives, Jim, of fans of other clubs looking into the situation at Celtic, and that's why I think people like Paul are great to come into the ACSOM bulletin. That leads me on to my final question today. I actually do believe we've got a very, very handy squad. I mean, like you say, we keep the top players from last season, other than Fraser Forster. We keep the top players. I mean, we obviously let Johnny Hayes go. Is Laxalt an upgrade on Johnny Hayes? I would say he is. Have we had an upgrade on Simunovic? I would say probably not. But over the piece, we've kept the team together and we have apparently strengthened it. And I do think that a change in manager could work with what we've got, and there might be a few additions in January, and that actually could weather the storm for this season on an interim basis. If they do get to that situation, Jim, and you've spoken about some of the kind of high-profile marquee managers, because we don't call them elite managers anymore, because, you actually did change my way of thinking about what is an elite manager. And I don't actually think Brendan Rodgers was an elite manager when we appointed him back in 2017. It seems like, was it 2016? I don't think he was an elite manager back then either. So where do we go from here? The last two appointments we've made have been unemployed managers, Brendan Rodgers and Neil Lennon. You've spoken about maybe going into the market of someone who is attached to a club. Then there's a compensation package. You also said you were talking about how attractive is the job. Well, I think Neil Lennon's on a pretty good salary, particularly for a manager in the same kind of vein as Brendan Rodgers, who's looking at Celtic as a stepping stone back into the English game, and there's plenty of those managers about. Or do we go for someone who is attached? Some of the names we've seen mentioned are Rafa Benitez, as you say, Alex Neil, Jack Ross has started being mentioned. Paul won't want him to leave Hibs. So where do we go from here? That is a $1 million question.
When we said we appointed Neil Lennon, the comment that the chief executive said that we had other applications and we didn't look at them. Now, if that was true, that's a pretty shocking thing to say, because words are very important. You know that as an author. Words are very important. So don't use words if you don't actually mean them. We had people applying for the job and we didn't look at them. Shocking. Any job that anyone applies for, you're looking for the most qualified to do the job. And as long as we get someone in who's qualified to do the job, I don't have an issue. Don't have an issue at all. And there'll be some evidence as to what that person has done before. And one assumes that the board will know the types of qualities and the types of qualifications they're looking for. And as long as that person fulfills that criteria, then that's fine. As long as they open up the envelopes this time and actually look at them, that would be a start. That would be a start. And I don't have an issue with an Alex Neil or a Jack Ross if on paper they look as if they could do the job. Now, I'm always concerned about a manager who's managed one team, because you could just be lucky with one team. But somebody who's maybe managed 2 or 3 teams and has got a track record of bringing on maybe young players and doing well in the transfer market, it'll be all the usual stuff. I mean, I don't know any more than anyone else with this kind of stuff. But there'll be set things that you think, as long as he ticks those boxes, then we'll get the guy in. It won't be a marquee signing. Just to clarify a point, I tried to make there, is that the Celtic job is a huge job, and people would love to do the Celtic job, just not the marquee signing, just not the marquee guys. They're not coming. They're not coming, basically. But it's an attractive job. You mentioned a few names last week. You mentioned a few names this week. If they have got the qualities to do the job, that's fine, because anything is better than what we've got just now. And that's why, at the expense of repeating myself again, is that I would just take the manager out just now, give it to the assistant manager, get the new guy in, whether that's in 2 weeks or in 2 months. I think that's a better option than just leaving things the way they are. Because for all we know, and I said this last week, for all we know, the players quite like John Kennedy. For all we know, maybe they might play better on John. They can't play any worse, and that's my point. And I think Sunday, as I said, I can't believe that we're talking about Sunday in the terms that we're talking about Sunday, St Johnstone. If we're going up to Pataudry, you'd be thinking, this is a big one. Anything could happen. We're playing St Johnstone at home. This is where we've got to so quickly. Now people have said, when we've had these chats in weeks gone by, the performances have been abject, but we've been putting the points on the board. And I suppose this has been coming, and I don't know if you listen to the other podcasts. What's the Celtic analytical podcast when they do all the kind of stats?
The huddle breakdown.
Huddle breakdown.
Yeah.
Listen to that. If any of your viewers haven't listened to that, listen to that. And they point out in very, very detailed terms exactly what's going wrong this season. One of the guys who's on that was saying back in August, this is going to go pear-shaped, and here's why. And it's a fascinating listen to what the guy was saying. He was saying things like, couldn't understand why we signed Shane Duffy, because he's not the player we need. We need a different type of player. Mm-hmm. And lots of other really, really good stuff. And this guy's pointing this out in August. And they analyse every game after it's happened. And they were saying things like, even simple things, the really, really detailed stuff that we're doing. But there are things like, the expected number of goals you would expect this year compared to last year, given the possessions. It's something like 20% down than what it was last year. The expected goals from the teams we're playing is 20% up. And all the stats that they were saying showed the exact same thing. Fascinating stuff. But it's there. And one assumes somebody at Celtic Park is doing that kind of thing as well. And trying to identify the problem, because the first thing you need to do is admit there's some sort of problem there. And how do you fix the problem? But what we're actually seeing is nobody's admitting that there actually is a problem there. I'll tell you what, look at the Champions League, we're out, problem. Look at the Europa, out, problem. Look at the League Cup, out, problem. Look at where we are in the league. There's a problem there. And people are paid £3.5 million to solve problems. They're not getting solved.
They're not getting solved, Jim. But you mentioned the huddle breakdown, and that is one of the podcasts that's coming together with a Celtic State of Mind for our quadruple treble charity weekender on the 19th and 20th of December. The last count, I think we had 18 shows confirmed. So it shows you how the Celtic fan base can come together to raise funds. So we're going to have back-to-back 12-hour broadcasts, both on Saturday and Sunday, 24 hours of free content. And all we ask is, if you're able to throw in a couple of quid into the fundraiser, then you'll see the actual link at the bottom of this video, wherever you're watching it, on YouTube, Facebook, and also on Twitter. We will be raising funds for Rock Talk, who assist people in the area with mental health issues. We're also looking to try and assist those who are blighted by homelessness by giving money to H4TH, Help for the Homeless. Food Facts and Friends will be supporting us with our food bank drive, and vulnerable kids at Christmas will be looked after with Children First. So a great initiative that a lot of Celtic fans are getting involved with, Jim, and I look forward to that weekend. And hopefully it will be a quadruple treble weekend. We need something to celebrate. What's going to happen between now and then? Will Neil Lennon still be in charge? We'll be following it every step of the way. Everybody who's been in touch with us today, thank you so much for getting involved. I didn't get to as many of the comments as I would normally like, but Jim Orr was making so many great points during the broadcast. I've got to thank you once again, Jim Orr, for joining me on A Celtic State of